Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC. I'm your host, Phil Bakke, and I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Mikka Burrell. Mikka, how's it going?
It's going well. Season 6. Can you believe it?
May thy knife chip and shatter. saying that to every team before just match day posts for the rest of the season.
Oh man, we're gonna have a lot of dude memes this year. I can already tell.
Yeah.
I'm good though, man. Year 6. It's crazy that we've been doing this for 6 years.
Yeah.
The club has existed for 6 years.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. It's been, I mean, it's kind of wild, and excited to be talking about the club once again and talking about some on-field stuff. It's always nice when actual, between the lines storylines are going to be told. A lot of, the off season, the silly season, all that stuff. But excited to talk and preview an actual match. So we'll talk about a bunch of the business that the club did, but we'll also bring it back and talk about Hartford coming out to the Swap season opener, home opener. Exciting stuff. But we'll start with a discussion, obviously, of what Locomotive looks like in 2024 under Brian Claerhout. And I will do my best to power through what is a little bit of a voice restriction here, so bear with me. But Mikka, I mean, first off, I guess, in terms of, obviously we've had plenty to say about the 2023 season. Going into 2024, obviously the expectations change all that, but what did you make overall of the business that Locomotive did and how this roster took shape over the last couple of months?
Yeah, the roster construction this time around was a complete departure, a complete change of tack from previous recruitment cycles. I think most obviously by the nationalities that we've recruited. Really, the club focused heavily on USL-proven talent and not just USL, but also like players that have played primarily in North America. On top of that, we've obviously strengthened our relationship with FC Juarez just across the border with a couple of players from that club on loan. I think that it's overall been very positive. I think it's something that a lot of fans have asked for, is to focus on players that are, closer to home, that we've seen, that are known quantities in this league, that aren't having to, go through perhaps visa issues or adapting to a brand new culture or coming from, far-flung places. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because that some of the most exciting signings we've had have been players from abroad. But yeah, it's been totally different this time around. We've really focused domestically, and I think that that can only be a good thing, especially with how much turnover that we've had. It's important that people are as settled as quickly as possible, because they need to learn to gel and play together relatively quickly if they haven't already, right? We'll obviously see how that looks on Saturday night when Hartford come to town, but I think overall this change of tack from the club is a positive one.
Yeah, I think the amount of players they've been able to bring in, and as early in the offseason, like you said, just having so much time compared to previous seasons where, I mean, often we were sort of entering the opening game of the season knowing that we weren't at the final answer in terms of roster build and all those things, and maybe had to add some pieces. I think we can confidently say that this is, about as complete as the lineup will get, with probably some room in there for flexibility if needed. But obviously, just feels a little bit more fleshed out, this squad on week one. So feel good about the depth, and I think in general the quality of depth is something that Brian clearly focused on, in that they did strengthen across a number of areas in the team. And when you're planning out, we may talk like projected 11s and things like that. When you're planning it out, there are multiple solutions at every position. There are players that we know are proven at a championship level, or maybe an equivalent level if they haven't played in the championship, who can plug into a lot of these positions. So it's nice to look at and have options in different areas. And we can talk about the fact the roster build may point us in the direction of how Brian is looking to line this team up come Saturday. But in terms of analyzing the pieces that they have brought in over the winter, Mikka, I mean, at goalkeeper, we know the sort of marquee name was Jamali White. And they've also added Ramon Pascal on loan from FC Juarez. But Jamali, obviously, sort of the headline there. Seems like he's going to probably grab hold of the number 1 shirt, and I'd be surprised if he didn't. But obviously, we had a chance to have a conversation with Jamali. But what do you think about their strength in goalkeeping?
Yeah, I mean, look, Jamali White, like I said, he's one of many known quantities in this league that we were able to recruit to the side, and I think that this is such a crucial area, obviously, for us to get right, because we know how influential the goalkeeper is generally, historically speaking, I guess you could say, in El Paso Locomotive style of play. I mean, the resume is incredible. Full Jamaica international, only being kept out by a legend in Andre Blake, right? So, and he had an incredible season last season. I think 10 clean sheets, 26 goals allowed in just 26 games. I mean, it's incredible stuff. And now, to be fair, Pittsburgh's defense was, a big part of that. But he definitely had many good performances in his own right. And I think that, barring any injury or anything, he should be the one between the sticks for the rest of the season, or for the entire season, I should say. And, he's said to us in conversations with him that he's comfortable with all of the things that modern goalkeepers are asked to do, as far as playing out from the back, long passing, and, just generally being a leader back there. So I have really good vibes about this signing. And he's also in a good age for a goalkeeper. So many, many, many more years ahead of him, playing at the very top level of his game. So overall, a really solid signing at the back.
Yeah, I think, we saw obviously a very aggressive sweeper last year in Benny. And I think Jamali is maybe not as aggressive in that way, but talked about being comfortable with the ball at his feet. And I think actually he talked about being maybe stretched a little bit more in that way by the way that Locomotive play. So it'll be interesting to see him get up to speed, I think with Bob Lilly in Pittsburgh, he was probably expected to just boot it a lot and be a little bit more direct. Not to say that Locomotive didn't, play direct at the end of last season, but it'll be interesting to see how his distribution is. But he is, a top level shot stopper, and it'll be key to get, to grips. I think, we've seen what instability at goalkeeper can do. And so when you can go out and get the number 1 off of, the best team in the league, record wise last season, that's a pretty good get. So, excited for Jamali. Obviously, I think Ramon, like the resume is just shorter, in terms of, like, he's obviously been involved in Bravos, reserve sides and everything. But, he'll be, I don't think it is necessarily like a completely done deal, in that I think there'll be some competition at goalkeeper. But I think Jamali will probably get the nod in the end. But just in front of them, probably, the biggest, I guess the biggest area of the squad. But in this back line, it does look like Brian is shaping the roster towards a back five, or, back three with wing backs, however you want to think about it. But, across this back line, a handful of big additions. And I think maybe the headline news at center back in particular is Brandon Craig coming in on loan from Philadelphia Union, joining, LAFC, like former LAFC Noah Dolenmeyer, in what is on paper like one of the most exciting, like young, or some of the most exciting young center back prospects in USL.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know, that Philadelphia, I think he was at Philadelphia before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we know that Philadelphia are a really good academy as far as the North American game goes. His resume for such a young player, I think he's only 19 years old, is really incredible. I mean, full US Youth International, 15 appearances for the U20s, 2 for the U23s, and he's going to have a lot to play for this season because I think he will want a spot in the Olympic squad for the US. 19 is extremely green for a defender, to be fair, but so I think the fans should have some patience with him, because maybe not everything that he tries will come off right away. But however, we have seen young defenders thrive in this team, most recently last season with Noah Dolenmeyer and Eric McHugh. So, with Craig in the back line and, our captain Huma kind of in the August of his career, it's very much looking like a very young setup at the back there. And that'll be interesting definitely to see what happens there. But as far as Craig as a player, it seems like he's very much in that kind of modern mold, ball-playing defender, dominant in the air, reasonably two-footed from what I can tell, and has played across the back line. So we'll see where he slots in. I mean, right-footed, I would assume somewhere on the right because we have some lefties that we have signed, but that remains to be seen. But yeah, he's a really exciting prospect. It's giving kind of like the Diego Luna of defenders, maybe. But I don't want to put too much pressure on the kid. But yeah, he looks very, very exciting indeed.
Yeah, at 19, he is exactly half of Yuma's age. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's insane.
No, so they've added some experience as well with the likes of Elijah Martin, Tony Alfaro, like some really experienced pieces as well. On the wings and at wing back in particular, it does feel like there's a couple of ways or maybe different options that Brian has in terms of who's going to feature at those positions. Obviously, of returning players, Eder Borelli and Nick Hines are both available on that left side. We also saw, I believe, according to reports in preseason, it sounds like Lucas Stauffer may have been playing on the left some, with obviously Miles Lyons and then Navarez as well, the loanee from Bravos, like getting some time at right back. So as far as those wing backs go, I think it'll actually be maybe even more up in the air than that, because we even saw Petar Petrovic like at left wing back for most of the second half of last season. So yeah, on the wings, I guess options is really what Brian has.
Yeah, this backline is extremely deep. I don't know that we've had this many defenders before, like that all ostensibly could play. Look, I think we have to highlight that there has been a loss of a lot of key players in this area, most notably Mark Navarro and Eric McHugh, as I mentioned before. So, I mean, these, especially in that right back position where Mark Navarro made so much, he produced so much from that area. I think it'll be interesting to see what Miles Lyons interprets that position as, in the post Mark Navarro era. If he is the starter, I don't know. I would assume he probably would be, but like you said, Stauffer has reportedly been playing in preseason, so we'll see about that. Yeah, on the other side, I mean, there's so much quality in that left wing back position. Borelli maybe is getting on a bit and has had his injury issues, but nothing that we've heard of recently that's been concerning. Petr Petrovic at times last season was undroppable. I mean, as far as his production is concerned. So I think he'll really be trying to force his way into the squad and make that position his own. I would be curious to know if he actually likes playing wingback. I think we've discussed last season that he looks really good there. But I wonder if he considers himself more of like a wide forward or a wide midfielder. But I mean, needs must, and if he wants to play, he might be a wingback. So,
yeah, and that is the interesting thing in the shape discussion. Basically, is how because if we see that 5-3-2 that they ended, or sorry, the 5-2-3 that they ended the season with. It ostensibly like the width is from the wing backs. Whereas if they play the 4-4-2 that they started the season with, then the wide midfielders, there is a space for those more attacking wide midfielders. So anyways, that's kind of where the question marks come. Cause I would say in general, in those wide areas is sort of where Locomotive have given themselves some, not a bad problem to have, just some selection dilemmas and who's providing with, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the attackers, because we've got a lot of wide attacking talent on this team. But moving into the midfield, the central midfield obviously last year was those two, Eric Calvillo and Liam Rose. Almost every single game, which probably contributed to some of the tired legs as the season wore on. With that being said, it does seem like there's a little bit of reinforcement. I guess maybe the question, even between the back line and midfield, is does Bolu Akinyote, the signing from Miami, is he going to be deployed as a defender, or is he going to be deployed as a maybe marshalling center back, or maybe more of a covering center back, or is he going to play as part of that pivot in midfield? And that to me, in and around what is otherwise like a quite young central midfielding core, or central midfield core with Lalito, Diego Abarca, and then Aaron Vasiljevic, who typically sort of plays wide, but has played in central midfield in the past. In that group, it really becomes a question of between Eric and Liam, is that still just the go-to pivot, or does Bolu figure or factor in there?
I mean, it's tough, right? Because that, like you said, that Calvillo-Rose partnership is so established at this point. We know they're great friends off the pitch as well. And that relationship is very strong. But Bolu Akinyote, for me, is kind of the midfield marquee signing, if you want to call him that. I mean, he's made over 100 appearances in USL as a defensive midfielder. So to not then play him there would kind of be insane, I think, because he's just so good there. He's such a strong and imposing presence there in that pivot position. So I think we'd be denying ourselves a big talent if we don't play him. But I mean, who knows? Who knows what they're seeing on the training pitch, and whether it ends up being more of a Rose Akinyote partnership, maybe, where we just have two kind of pivots just sit and let the wing backs and the attackers go forward and they protect the back line, rather than having Calvillo kind of bomb on. I don't know. But then you're leaving out Calvillo, who is incredible, right? Probably our most like our real like attacking 8, I guess you could say. So yeah, that we have a little bit of a selection crisis there, I think too. But after that, after Rose, Calvillo, Akinyote, I feel like that's where there's a bit of a gulf in perceived quality. Maybe, I mean, Basujevic, we just haven't seen enough of him, right? I mean, he came and he was injured, and that's not his fault. But we'll just have to see what he offers. Abarca and Lalito haven't really kicked on, and I don't know that that's necessarily for lack of talent or anything like that. It's just the pecking order, right? They're young guys, and sometimes the coach just wants to go with experience and doesn't want to overexpose them or anything. But in particular, I think Abarca, we've seen so many flashes of brilliance from him, but he's not really like earned a sustained place in the squad. And then Lalito was brought over with a bit of fanfare, I guess you could say, and kind of same thing for him. So, yeah, I feel like there's kind of 2 tiers of like midfield that we have. And whether that's a good or a bad thing, I guess we'll see. But, yeah, Akinyote for me is that big signing in the middle of the park there.
We did get a comment or a question in this case from Mark Ramos, at Ramos 5173. Mark Ramos said, how big of a role will the youngsters have to play this year, considering the structure of the squad? Do you think we see more significant minutes, or with the depth that's been brought in, do you think Brian is trying to maybe shield them more from those sort of like forced minutes that maybe Diego and Lalito especially like saw at the height of the injury crisis last year?
Yeah, I mean, we have no inside information on this one way or another, but my feeling is that Brian and co will want to play the experience that they've brought in, just simply because, I mean, these players are experienced in the USL, or in Mexico where they're playing, and they're going to want to play, and they'll probably have been given assurances about that as far as playing time. I mean, I guess it really depends what we do in the U.S. Open Cup, right? Because if we can really make a run there for once, then maybe that gives us an opportunity to play younger players. But so far, that just hasn't been the case.
No, we were dropping out of the U.S. Open Cup long before it was fashionable. I agree. I think they'll definitely have a role to play there, and I think the reality with squad size is everyone on the squad, like, no one gets to be like making up the numbers. Like our squads are only 23 players, I think, like including goalkeepers. Or maybe 25. We might be up to 25 this season with the loanees. But either way, like they're thin compared to the squads, that you see elsewhere. And look at Liverpool this year with like the amount of, people getting their debuts and stuff. So like if they're having to do it, like our kids they'll be involved. I think a couple of the people like Craig and Dolenmeyer, I think, are genuine. I mean, we saw Dolenmeyer's quality at the end of last season. I think Craig as well. Like we know that they can be involved. Miles Lyons, I mean, at times was one of our most consistently like good players last year.
Right.
And in filling in for the player who on paper was our best player, Mark Navarro. So I think you'll see varying degrees of involvement from the different young players, but I think all of them have a big role to play. And I think Brian would probably say the same in terms of no one gets to just like, dress and like be at the end of the bench. Like everybody has to be able to contribute and compete in training every day. So I think there's there's big things on the table, especially for the likes of Craig, who will return to the Union at the end of the season. And, like you said, be expecting to make some strides in the youth national team, etc. So he definitely won't be coming here to, be a bit player or something like that. He's looking to kick on and make a big name. So all that being said, I think the questions in midfield for those youngsters are particularly sharp, just because I think in both the case of Lalito and Diego, not to put undue pressure on them, but I think there is another level that they'll need to find to be the true like understudy or however you want to like kind of characterize it behind Eric and Liam and Bolu. Like that next line needs to be able to match that quality of the regular starters on a more regular level. And I'm sure that's being impressed on them in the off season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, up top, this is obviously like where, in terms of hype in the off season and in terms of like, I mean, this is where the goals are scored. This is where, the excitement is. It is a completely reworked attack for El Paso Locomotive, and they made arguably the like marquee signing of the like one of the marquee signings of the offseason, although I think maybe there were others that got more hype. But Amando Moreno making the trip down the Camino Real to El Paso from New Mexico. Obviously, the club making a pretty big statement, going and grabbing not just a player from their closest rival, but their best player.
Crazy, right? Is he the first major player to cross that New Mexico United El Paso Locomotive divide? I mean, I'm not counting Beigel necessarily.
Kiesewetter, technically, I think.
Kiesewetter, okay. But I mean, coming to us.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I think this is bigger than Kiesewetter, actually.
Yeah.
Amando Moreno, I mean, 24 goals, 18 assists, and 75 appearances for New Mexico United. Full El Salvador international, 28 years old, smack dab in his prime. He did have that 10-month layoff with a ruptured ACL in 2021, but he came back and had 6 goal involvements in 12 games right away. So
yeah,
after that injury, so and then 15 goal involvements in 2023. So it seems like the ACL is healed up just fine. He's a very exciting player, and he's a player that I hated us playing against. And actually, I think that there's a theme with the attackers that we've signed that have all been thorns in our side very, very recently. We'll get onto his compatriot, Joaquin Rivas, I'm sure. But this is an incredible signing. I'm really excited to see what he does for the boys in blue. And I hope he sticks the dagger in when we go up to New Mexico United in a month.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the other names brought in, well, I guess I'll first say on the ACL point for Moreno, he's had that bounce back season, like you said, which is so key in like, are they going to be the same player when they return from that injury? And I think he's resoundingly, answered that question, which is great to see, particularly as he gets into that like late 20s sort of age range where those injuries are not like a given that you bounce back from.
Right.
And he has done that. So that was great to see. You mentioned the thorns in the side. Obviously the other signings, Tumi Moshabane, Joaquin Rivas, Justin Dillon, have all at different times like been, it's funny, Dillon maybe less recently, but I'll never forget those winners that he scored for San Antonio against Locomotive. But Moshabane and Rivas, both players who, on their player profile would be listed as a winger, but both ostensibly played a majority of their time, especially last year, more so at center forward. maybe wide of a center forward in Moshebane's case when Damas was playing. But, 8 goals, 6 assists last season for Moshebane in San Diego, 10 goals, 3 assists for Rivas in Miami for a pretty poor Miami team.
Scored a brace against us, right?
Yeah, in Jeez. What had to have been one of the low points of the season, that bad loss on the road to Miami. But 13 goal involvements for Rivas as well. And then Dylan, while his overall goal tallies are not like at the height of, what you would maybe expect for strikers, you have to think like the amount of minutes and just like the amount of times that he was getting involved, despite not being maybe the first choice. 3 goals, 4 assists, and profile wise, Dylan just kind of fits a hole in this team when you've got so many sort of like skilled, tricky, wide attackers. Dylan has that sort of more traditional number 9 presence up top. So what did you think? I mean, profile wise, what'd you make of the signings? Do you think these answer some of the questions that Locomotive got asked last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting that we've gone so young at the back, but at the front is really where the maturity is, because I feel like oftentimes it's the other way around. When you're trying to rebuild a team or retool, however you want to characterize what we've done this offseason. But yeah, I mean, there's just so much experience and just having done it and proven it before in this league, from all of these players that we've signed. I mean, you talk about Dylan and kind of how maybe the goal scoring doesn't exactly pop off the page, because he was more of like a bit part player in San Antonio towards the end there. But what he has been able to contribute has been pretty good off the bench. And I do like that he grabs assists, that he brings others into play, because, thinking of him bringing guys like Moreno, Moshebane, and Rivas into the play is very exciting indeed. And, we've seen him come on against us late in games and just be a menace towards that back line, even if he's not scoring, but just giving them something to think about, and, creating space for others. Joaquin Rivas is really interesting because he's 31, so he's going to be one of the older heads in this lineup. But still producing at a very high level. I'm just really interested to see what he does. I think it's always interesting when players join us from the East, because I think it's been a mixed bag in the past. So between him and White, it'll be interesting to see how they adapt to Western Conference football, which I do think is a little... I personally think it's better. It's higher quality. But that's just me and me being biased, I suppose. I think this attacking core is very, very solid. And I do like that they can all pretty much play across each other's positions as well. Yeah. Because I think that'll be important as we're trying to build partnerships and see what works. So, but Moreno, Rivas, the two Salvadorans, along with Calvillo, I think the swap needs to start selling pupusas, to be honest. So
I think everybody could get behind that. I do like the fact that, like you said, there's a lot of interchangeability, and if you think of a front three, which it does seem, that's typically what we played with, or even if it is maybe a front two of a striker with another attacker sort of playing off of them, in a 4-4-2, I think in both cases you've got there's a lot of dynamics that can shift throughout the course of a game, where a player can take up multiple different positions and sort of interchange and play off of each other, and having that sort of unpredictability of you don't necessarily know where they're going to pop up. You don't necessarily know like when they're going to make that run into the box, or when they're going to make a, a more infield run or make an inside out run or anything, or be in the channels. Like there's all kinds of different things that you can do. And I think in general, just having that unpredictability is going to give teams some fits, and it'll just be about them building up that fluidity. Now obviously we all feel good about like a nice result in preseason against New Mexico. 3-0 win is always nice, and sustaining goal scoring, especially when you've got a lot of new faces, like it can sometimes be tough to get that like fluency up front. So hopefully they can hit the ground running, and obviously good signs in that last preseason warm up. But overall, I think, like you said, it's always nice to have, from a fan's perspective, sort of the measuring stick of these are all known quantities coming into the team, and it's easy to make the relative comparison when you already know that the guy can do what we're asking them to do at this level in this league. And now it's just a matter of, can they do it as a unit? Like that's we all know that individually the names on the page are good. And does that translate into a successful team? And that really is, I guess, Claire Hout's remit this year. So before we get on to talking about Hartford, who is another team that has gone through a ton of like change in the off season, I did want to, we got a question in, and I wanted to just address real quick from @OneStarGalileo, Oscar on Twitter. He said, although it's a new season, he just wanted to ask, like, why didn't they re-sign Lucho and Chapa? Do we know anything? Seems like we signed a lot of defenders, and cheers to a great season. Glad to have you guys back. Well, first off, thank you. Happy to be back. But as far as, I wanted to address the Lucho and Chapa thing, because we saw Chapa popped up at Greenville in League One. Obviously, Josue Aron Gomez at Omaha Union in League One. Lucho back in San Antonio because, True Detective, time is a flat circle. Everything we have done, we will do again. But as far as maybe we can address the Lucho thing first, just because I think the Chapa one is maybe more straightforward, where it seemed to sort of a contract came to an end. A decision was made based on contributions and players that we were bringing in, that it was just time. And maybe, we didn't see a way ahead with Chapa in terms of competing in that midfield. The Lucho one, I think, and this is all hearsay, but I think that one was a little bit more of a breakdown of a relationship versus just letting a contract run down.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, expand on that.
Oh. Yeah, so, I mean, this is all... So, I'll just say from the beginning, Lucho's last game for the club was that 5-0 loss in Phoenix. And there was something about that night where we saw like no more Lucho, and then very sporadic Yuma, and I think no more Eder Borelli, like for the rest of the season, which each of those, I mean, I know at certain points we addressed them as injuries or whatever, but immediately after the Phoenix game, Lucho was not listed as an injury. He just like wasn't being named in the squad. Wasn't listed as hurt, wasn't, and so I think we were all kind of asking like, hey, it feels like something happened, because all of a sudden these like prominent figures of the squad are just like not in it. And I don't have it on, I don't have firsthand accounts or anything like that, but based on people I've talked to who may have knowledge of the situation, it did seem like Lucho essentially, I don't know if there was something said or something, a line was crossed or whatever, but Lucho essentially like was done representing Locomotive like after that night. And so this was always gonna take place with, like, he was on the way out, unfortunately. And I know they were saying that he was hurt and everything at the end of last season, but yeah, it just seemed like something had gone down, and that relationship unfortunately ended. As much as we all would have loved, I think, to see Lucho see out the rest of his playing days, in Locomotive Blue, it wasn't to be. And, especially in the heat of difficult moments in a season, like, things can happen, and at times those things can be mended, and at other times those things can't. And in this case, Lucho did choose to go back to San Antonio. I think it'll be fascinating what the reception is like, because he is rightly a beloved figure in El Paso, and it's going to hit different, I think, for a lot of people when they see him in black and red again, after the years he spent here. But not sure how you think about, like, Lucho's legacy, I guess, in the aftermath of all that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that his legacy is by any means, like, tarnished or anything. I think he's given us enough good memories that, those will last. Scored some very important goals for us, had some very iconic celebrations over the years, and has just been a big figure at this club. Yeah, it's unfortunate that it ended that way, but sometimes that's football. And it's not the first time, right, that we've had less, more kind of acrimonious circumstances behind a player's departure, and that it is what it is, without wanting to use too many cliches. But yeah, we'll miss Lucho, but I am excited to see what Dylan can do. I think that's a very interesting storyline, the two of them switching places. Yes. And I'm interested to see. I mean, I suppose I don't care that much, but it would just be interesting to see how Lucho is received back in San Antonio after that goal that he scored against them last summer, and the celebration, and just at that point still very much feeling El Paso through and through. Yeah. So yeah, obviously a big figure leaves the club. And I'm sure he will be missed, but I think we've also bought a lot of goals into this side, and that excites me. And it's something different.
Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, like you said, and it is a complete retooling of the attack. But as we get into just looking ahead now, previews of week ones are incredibly difficult because obviously we have nothing to go off of aside from a handful of preseason results and names on the page. But talking about Hartford Athletic, the story definitely starts with them bringing in Brendan Burke, who left Colorado Springs a couple of years ago to be a assistant at Houston Dynamo. He's since left, which started a whole other chain of USL coaching events, because I believe it was Juan Guerra who is now down there from Phoenix. So anyways, there's been an MLS assistant butterfly effect should be like a thing in USL after the way this offseason went. But we do get Burke touchline antics at the swap in week one.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really interesting appointment. He is a good manager, very experienced in the lower levels of the game in the United States, and did a pretty good job at Colorado Springs, got them into the playoffs. I think they finished 5th. Had a lot of good players there. And yeah, he can be a little bit unpredictable on the touchline. But I think that makes for good entertainment, shall we say. But yeah, really interesting to see him move to the East. Because again, I do think that football is a little bit different. But Hartford, I mean, they're the kind of side where it's like there's nowhere to go but up, presumably, right? They had such a miserable season. And I think that they've really signed a lot of interesting players. I mean, Marcus Epps, 9 goals, 7 assists last season for FC Tulsa, has a penchant for scoring some absolute screamers as well. So, I mean, you definitely get your money's worth when you buy a Hartford ticket this season, presumably, if Marcus Epps performs to his level. They brought in a goalkeeper as well named Renan Ribeiro from Brazil, who did the league and the cup double with Sporting Clube de Portugal in the 18-19 season, which is insane. And he actually did play in that cup, that Taça de Portugal run. So he'll be in between the sticks, 33 years old, very experienced. And then there's, smatterings of former switchbacks players in this side who followed Brendan Burke, Jay Chapman, Romario Williams, Deshane Beckford. I mean, these are all players that can put the ball in the net when they're playing at their best. So,
I think
Hartford.
I think Makangila and then Mishi and Galena. Mishi and Galena for sure, but I think Makangila actually joined Hartford last year from Colorado Springs.
Oh, okay.
Ahead of, so it's like, so there's all kinds of, they're all
kinds
over.
of connections. Yeah.
But yeah, the core of the team is very, very Burke coded.
Right. Yes. Which, I mean, hey, if you can get your guys, and that shows that Hartford are really backing him and that they're serious about improving. So we cannot take this for granted. I mean, they might not be last season's Hartford, right? So, it'll be interesting to see. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, but they were that kind of like bright spot on the road in a very dark time for us last season, right? Where we had a decent result out there. I feel like I remember Noah Dolenmeyer having like a blinder that game. But so it's a very interesting matchup coming up here, and it'll just be interesting to see kind of how all the pieces fit, because they're kind of like us in a way in that they've really really overhauled it.
Yeah, I think in terms of the season for Burke, the question is, can Mishi and Galena hit the heights that he did like under Burke in Colorado Springs? Can Romario Williams be Haji Berry, basically? Like that is the question. Because, and I'm not trying to like slag Burke off too much, but the one big season that he had in Colorado Springs was a record like goal scoring season for Haji Berry. Right. And they struggled the second that, like, because he left towards the end of that season in that transfer deal to Egypt. And they fell off. Like, they don't get me wrong, they made the Western Conference semifinals, but they lost like 5 of their last 6 or something like that going into the playoffs. Like, they really struggled. So they've got some really great pieces, and it's just about like, does it all come together? And for this game in particular, getting a big road trip for the first game has got to be a tough ask. Like, to go for your first game of the season, to go from the east to the west, and like have to play in El Paso. They're going to have to get to grips with, they've been training in the off season. I'm presumably on the East Coast, in Connecticut, and they're going to get thrown into a game at some elevation, dry air, like all that stuff. So that is all going to play a part, as they've been training in the winter in Connecticut. So probably a different vibe. I'm sure they got some like warm weather training in like Tucson, or, cause that's like where every USL club goes to do preseason.
USL's Dubai.
It's our Marbella or whatever, like warm weather.
Our Costa del Sol.
Yeah. So no, I think again, like you said, names on the page, very strong. I think to call out a couple of the people that I think could have big impacts for Hartford in terms of it not just being switchbacks like 2.0, like Burke switchbacks 2.0, especially in defense. Joey Farrell from Pittsburgh, I think, was a really good signing in terms of like an experienced center back. They also got Joey Akpuono from on loan from FC Cincinnati, who is a very highly touted, like similar deal to Brandon Craig, maybe a little bit, an older version, but a highly touted center back prospect. And then Reese Buckmaster from Memphis, like very good fullback. I think the wild cards are like their Machine Galena, Musha Galusa, Marcus Epps. Like if they can hit the ground running, that is an extremely potent front line in Hartford. And they kind of thought that they had that last season too. And it never came together, obviously, in any meaningful way. So names on page are good. And like, can Burke bring it together is a question mark. But the last kind of question, and this is all going to be, total shots in the dark. But the question we got asked the most on Twitter, and, what we'll have to try to do is, can we project what starting 11 Locomotive trot out? We might have a little intel from that last preseason friendly if we want to make inferences from that. But do we think we have enough to put together an 11 for Locomotive and try to guess how they're going to play?
Let's try it. Should we settle on a formation first?
Yeah, I think so. What do you think? What do you think?
I'm thinking 5-2-3.
Yeah, I totally agree.
3-4-3, however you want to.
Yeah.
However you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Yeah, we can. We can call it a 3-4-3, just so we can pick the center backs and the wing backs as like two separate things.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I totally agree that we'll play with, 3 center backs, 2 wing backs, the 2 central midfielders and 3 attackers. I think that is totally fair. So we'll start with goalkeeper, probably fairly easy, but probably going Jamali White on this one.
Yeah, Jamali White.
So the starting 3 center backs, obviously we talked about there's quite a bit of depth here. Where do you think we go in terms of youth versus experience?
So I'm going to go from left to right.
Yeah.
Before like looking up the pitch. I think maybe Tony Alfaro will have that left center back spot, left-footed, experienced guy, to counteract the youngins that I think will be starting, and Dollenmeyer in the middle, and Craig as the right center back. That's my guess for the 3.
Yeah. I have to agree that I think that will be the first choice, like for a bulk of the season. Alfaro being the calm presence back there with, marshaling his two young charges. But yeah, I would say it's probably a toss up there. And, who knows? I think Palua probably fights his way into that mix, every once in a while, but yeah, I think Alfaro, Dollenmeyer, Craig is probably a good shout for day one. So wingbacks now.
Wingbacks, yeah. I'm going Petrovic on the left and Lucas Stauffer on the right.
Yep.
And that one is really being informed by preseason for me.
Yeah.
I'm between Lyles and Stauffer, but it seems like Stauffer seems to be favored right now. So
yeah, it seems like Stauffer has kind of won the upper hand in preseason just based on like some chatter and obviously like he got a bulk of the minutes against New Mexico in that last warm up, so it just feels like he is going to be kind of first choice. Stauffer, we didn't talk about in the preview, but Stauffer was one of the few like statistical bright spots for an absolutely shocking Las Vegas Lights. And there's a reason that, you know, of that crop of players, like Brian, you know, targeted Lucas to bring in, because most of those players would have been completely free for the taking with the overhaul that Vegas are doing. And, you know, there wasn't a ton of demand, but Stauffer, I think, does set apart in that way. And then, yeah, I think it is with the options. I think Petrovic, what he brings in terms of like playmaking ability and just like ball carrying ability, he is like a great out ball because he has a great first touch, like unbelievable control, like doesn't get it taken off him easily. So yeah, I think Petrovic probably gets the nod, but again, it's a position at which like we are quite deep in, and we could see any number of names. Like Elijah Martin could even be in that conversation, depending on how defensive or offensive. Like Brian really has a lot of customizability in how to treat that position. But yeah, I think Petrovic is a good shout, particularly at home when you expect to kind of take the game to the opposition for most of the 90. So the midfield too, this is the question. It's like, I mean, there's really three options for two positions, but it feels like a tough choice.
I will say Calvillo will start, and he'll be kind of like the shuttling 8. And I'm going to give it to Akinyode to partner him. I just think that that's too big a signing to leave on the bench.
Yeah.
And by the way, Liam Rose is a new dad, so need the rest.
Yeah.
Right. You know how that goes, Phil. I certainly don't. But I don't know. Something's just telling me that Akinyode might make that position his, but that's what I'm gonna go with just for now.
Yeah, I have to think there's something about Bolu and Eric that just feels correct from a balance standpoint.
Right.
And you might be able to, by deploying someone like Bolu, you might get a little bit more freedom from Eric, which I think is not, it wasn't a bug of last year's system, but I think it's something that they might be able to exploit more. Like if they have less of the sort of shared responsibility like they did last season, where it's like Eric and Liam were both expected to kind of do all of it. And so it wasn't as predictable, I guess, like who would pop up in like forward areas and things like that. Whereas if you have a more defined defensive side of the pivot, it could maybe free up Eric a little bit. So I like that shout. And again, you know, it's not to say Liam's never getting in the team again, because we know the quality that he brings too. So I think it'll just depend on the day.
We know how poor we looked without him.
Yeah.
in certain
absolutely
games last season. Yeah, I mean, I know I've said it on the podcast before, Phil, that Eric Calvillo for me probably has, I mean, the team's changed a lot, but at the time he probably had the best like shooting technique of anyone in the team, who's not like a forward. But we don't see it if he's not near the box, right? So yeah, I think if they can really be the one protecting the back line, then we might see more magic from Calvillo, as you said. So yeah, maybe I'm trying to manifest that, to be honest.
So the front three, another tough question to ask, because you're trying to plug about 5 players into 3 spots, but
Yeah, I think Dylan starts at number 9. And then I gotta go with the two Salvadorans.
Yeah.
Armando Moreno on the left, Joaquin Rivas on the right. I think that just makes the most sense.
Yeah.
And is really exciting, to be honest. I mean, on paper, that's really, really stacked.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think Dylan from the start makes a lot of sense because he gives you just a lot of options. I love the idea too of having Moshabane and Zacharias like as options off the bench, especially against tired legs. Because you can shuffle the pack a little bit up front. And, you know, if the hold up play or all that stuff like isn't sticking, you can bring Dylan off and you can shift Rivas more centrally and, or put Moshabane up top. And, you know, there's all kinds of different options. So yeah, I like that. And then, you know, you've got the option too, where if Dylan doesn't start in a given game, then he's coming off the bench and can bully people physically like that have been, you know, trying to keep pace with the likes of, you know, Moreno and Moshabane all game. So yeah, I think all in all, exciting options, but I like the idea of starting with a more of a focal point in attack, especially while they're trying to build some of that fluency, because you can kind of like, you have an easy button if you're like, hey, I'm kind of out of ideas. It's like, well, give it to the big guy and let's see what happens. Or put it in the mixer, as they say. So yeah, I like the idea of Dylan starting. So the last task for us is to try to predict what happens. With no context, with no evidence, Mikka, what's your first pick'em of the year?
I don't know if I've ever been right on opening night. Who knows? Let's keep things positive.
Sure.
I think we'll win.
I agree.
We'll win, and I think it'll be 1-0. I think we might struggle a little bit just to like get up to pace with like it's a competitive fixture. I think it's always different when you're going from preseason to the regular season, obviously. And there are a lot of new faces. So there might be some stuttering in the beginning, but I think ultimately we'll score a goal.
I'm like totally torn between, is it going to be, you know, boring, like sort of rope-a-dopey game, like cagey, where the two teams are just trying to like get their feet under them and get to grips with a competitive game. Or is it just going to be like knockdown, drag out, like it's just like chaos because two teams that have a ton of talent just like throw everything they have at each other. And there may be lacking a little of that cohesion that would lead to a tighter game. But we know that Brian is like very much like a defensive organization, gets trained first, like type manager, and like shape over everything, you know, and like organization over everything, control, as he said often last year. So I tend to agree that it'll be low scoring. I'm having trouble giving us a clean sheet, and scoring 2 goals on opening night just feels like a tall task, because have we ever scored multiple goals on the first game of the season? But I'll go 2-1, and I'll just say that, you know, one of those sort of it's cagey at 1-1, but Locomotive find a winner on opening night. Yeah, I all in all, like, obviously we want to see the team get out of the gate strong. It is a long old season. We know that. I mean, even those teams that win, you know, you could win 8 in a row, and still struggle later in the season. So, you know, it's not the be all end all. But it will be nice, and I know a lot of Locomotive fans will want them to get off to a little bit quicker start than last year, where 3 games in we were kind of questioning everything. But to remind everyone of the start, Locomotive once again handed a very tough opening week in terms of fixture congestion. So Hartford at home on Saturday, and then they turn around and play Monterey Bay at home on Wednesday, and then they're home against Louisville the following Saturday. They play the midweek against FC Juarez that Wednesday, the in-season friendly, and then we're away at Vegas that Saturday. So it's about as packed as you could possibly imagine in the first 4 regular season games, because we've squeezed a 5th one in there, and I'm glad the club is doing that friendly against Bravos. I just wish maybe it had happened like last week instead of next week.
That would have been nice. Yeah, it's a Wednesday, right? Is that
Yeah, the 20th.
Yeah, that's kind of brutal.
Yeah,
but hey, all right.
But
well, yeah. I'm hyped now that we've talked through all of this. I've been so like preoccupied with just like life and work and stuff, and now the season is like upon us, and now I'm finally getting like, yes, it's about to happen.
Yeah,
let's go. I'm really excited.
It's exciting. Yeah. Squad is like looking good on paper, and now it comes the good part where we get to see just how good it is. Amongst all this, we'll do our best from a broadcast perspective to keep everyone updated, because with USL adding more broadcast partners and more ways to watch the games and all that stuff, we'll obviously like keep you abreast. But for now, ESPN Plus is still like the default. For anyone who has questions on the whole CBS Sports thing and all that, like, we do have a couple of games that are on cable later this year. I think we actually have 3 like national TV games. And then there'll be random games that are selected to be played on CBS Sports Golazo, which is a free like streaming. You don't need Paramount Plus to watch that. So there'll be USL games on that as well. I think there's like 10 per month or something like that. I can't remember the number, but they're picking games for that as well. So yeah, we'll keep you updated on like where to watch the game. But luckily, these first few, ESPN Plus, nice and simple, where you're used to watching Locomotive.
Right. Or the swap.
Yeah, if you're not in person.
Through.
I'm speaking as my
Locos
poor
abroad.
Yeah, my
Locos Nation.
Locos Nation. Yeah.
I got you. Yes.
But no.
And don't let Fot Mob fool you. It is on Saturday.
Yes.
The game is on Saturday, not Sunday.
And I'm seeing all kinds of disinformation on the internet. FB Ref has the game at the wrong time. Fot Mob has the game at the wrong time. So beware of, fake news and misinformation.
Just USL things.
The game is not at 4 p.m. on Sunday. Like, the game is at 7 p.m. on Saturday night, prime time at the Swamp. And it's time to go.
Let's go. I'm also, by the way, shout out 8th Notch.
Yep.
Really looking forward to see what they do for season 6.
Yep.
Yeah, they're having their pregame at B17. So this is not paid promotion. I just want to see all the locos out there having a good time. So yeah, if you haven't sat with 8th Notch in the last 5 years, come on. If you're listening to this, I would hope you have by now. But if not, you should. It's a great way to experience a Locomotive match day. But yeah. Phil, are you One last thing before we close out.
Yep.
Are you making a pilgrimage at all this season to El Paso, do you think?
I am dedicated to finding a way. There are a couple of things that are shaping up for my summer plans right now.
Okay.
But once the dust settles, then I'll be able to plan a weekend. And it is my intention right now to get out to El Paso for a game day, and reunite with my people.
Yo, do we like fuck around and do a live episode?
Oh, absolutely. If we're all in the same place, we absolutely.
It's been too long, man.
Yeah. No, we should. Anyway,
that's exciting.
Yeah, it is absolutely my intention to get back out. It's been far too long, and now that I'm like, somewhat established and feel like I understand how my life works now, I can come back.
All right.
No. Yeah. Well, for those listening for the first time, I didn't do any of our normal plugs at the beginning, so we're on all the big podcast platforms wherever you listen to podcasts. And hopefully you'll stick around for the season. We do stuff on YouTube and Twitch as well with live watch-alongs of away games. So go ahead and check those out as well. Obviously, a ways to go before we have any of those to even comment on with the traditional homestand. But yeah, check us out on all the podcast players. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram and wherever else. And yeah, excited for season 6. We're doing big things.
Season 6, let's go.
All right. And until next time, stay loco.